All right, as we continue now to look at the U.S.-South Africa meeting, President Cyril Ramaphosa, we do expect, will be touching down in about under half an hour now, as we heard their shown saying that within the next hour, we can expect the President of South Africa to arrive at Dallas International Airport and then be taken to the Washington, D.C. hotel there. But let's look at this meeting, right, and the tone of it, and how then does South Africa begin to approach this particular meeting, because you do have others who say that it's going to be a fine line, quite a tightrope that the South African delegation will have to walk, but others are saying the South African delegation needs to assert itself. So let's speak now to Sandile Swana, Political and Governance Analyst, who's joining us for this conversation. A very good evening to you, Mr. Swana, and thank you so much for your time. The presidency says that this visit will provide a platform to reset the strategic relationship between South Africa and the U.S. Will it?
Well, it will certainly, thanks, Bongiwe. It will certainly set it. About resetting it, it's another matter. And the issue here is that the U.S. is seeking to monopolize South Africa and monopolize certain relationships. For instance, the U.S. is very actively involved in setting what in essence is a private deal between itself and Iran, another private deal between itself and Russia in the Ukraine matter, another private deal perhaps with China. And then South Africa is involved with those parties, and the US wants to insist that South Africa must not be involved. South Africa must also not be involved in how the US behaves in Palestine. And South Africa is heavily involved there. So how you reset that is actually a mystery to me, because those are issues in the first place that should have been on the table of the United Nations, being solved by the international community organized under the UN, not in the private office of Mr. Trump.
So how does then the meeting pan out in your view? Because there are some that are saying that when it comes to South Africa, there needs to be a balance here between the fact that we've heard the president say that South Africa will not be bullied, and those who are saying, go in, assert yourself, be firm when you must. But others are saying you also need to, as a South African president in that particular meeting, make sure that you give Donald Trump his flowers where he's actually attempted to be peacemaker. Others are saying that also do watch your tone, because things could escalate quickly. So what approach does South Africa then pick?
The approach here, to me, somebody once said that history is the finest education for a future statesman. Now, for instance, in this case, if we're talking about approach, South Africa has traded with the US since 1871. And it's only in the past 25 years that the US introduced unilateral trade, and as far as I'm aware, such as AGOA, which South Africa never asked for. But in introducing those preferential trade, which DNAs and many white farmers in South Africa are fixated on, comes with terms that would compromise our sovereignty. So my view when I introduced the concept of history is to say we've done trade since 1871 until the year 2000, and that trade actually continued even after AGOA, and it continues till today. Can we then go back to just doing trade on merit, the quality of our products, the quality of our service, and forget about cultural issues trying to convert us to what J.D. Vance calls this Western white Christian civilization, that we become an enclave of that civilization here. We've done trade, can we stick to that and not introduce this thing of converting us to your culture? So that is that history. The other history, which is very recent, is that there is no genocide. I'm sure that people at Harvard, people at MIT, Stanford, the top universities in the US, could easily educate all of us, including Trump, within half a day, that there is no genocide in South Africa. There are no refugees in South Africa. So there is a need to stick to that accuracy of facts and historicity. that sort of thing, because now you are trying to convert a relationship by and large that has been damaged by inexactitudes, mendacity, and duplicity in the recent times. A relationship that had no problem otherwise. And the last thing I will say about this, people must not underestimate the desire for the Americans to live above the law. For instance, they've already launched sanctions against the chief prosecutor of the ICC, something personally I never thought would happen in my lifetime, that any nation on earth who could go and prosecute the prosecutors and sanction actually the officials and lawyers and people who are working and assisting the ICC. So basically, the US wants to live above the Constitution of South Africa, above the Constitutional Court of South Africa, above the United Nations, above the ICC, above the ICJ, and live in a lawless environment and invite South Africa into that domain of lawlessness.
So
to be partner with them.
In light of what you're saying, then could we see ideological differences overshadowing this particular meeting, and your earlier point not possibly being the only point of discussion, but we see more of ideological differences? Is that a possibility?
That could be a possibility, but I need to also alert you to the history of this particular ideology that perhaps we're talking about here. The idea of a United Nations or League of Nations was originated by Woodrow Wilson, an American president. And later on, Jan Smuts of South Africa assisted greatly in the formation of the UN. So that is the ideology. When Ramaphosa and company talk about multilateralism, the BRICS group talks about multilateralism, they are talking about an idea that originated in the United States of America. Therefore, it is a desertion of his own history and his own culture for Trump to start to want to implement unilateralism after they themselves advocated for multilateralism.
So when you look at this symbolic moment, because a lot of people have said that this is quite symbolic, especially given the, the tensions between the two countries. But at the same time, one would then ask that when you look at the continent and the global south, how significant is this moment even for, those particular entities?
This moment, not just the South African meeting, but this moment, the first 5 months of 2025 is critically important, because I hope that South Africans now know that the United States of America is not a partner you can trust. These are people overnight who can turn against you. You can ask the Canadians about that, how it goes, where your neighbor starts saying that they want to take you over completely and make you part of their territory. So South Africa is being invited to be an enclave, a satellite, or a colony of the United States. So these are not people that treat us as equals or view us as equals. They view us as vassals. And many people, whether those people are Europeans, the EU is actually bewildered by what the Americans have done to them. The treachery of the Americans has been tremendous. So even if these relations are cured in whatever way, whoever is involved in them, especially the business people, you need to find alternative markets, because the Americans cannot be trusted.
You say that if at all these relations are cured, one would say it's one thing to cure the relations, it's another to change perceptions. Can we see changed perceptions at the end of this meeting, or will the cure just be a cure but simply not a change in attitudes and positions?
No, the attitudes cannot change. If in this day and age there is still somebody who believes that they can actually claim another person's territory, that is a very entrenched belief of, in our case, we experienced it as white supremacy, European colonialism, settler colonialism, as happened in South Africa, as happened in the USA. Remember, the USA was born on settler colonialism, the genocide of the American Indians, and the enslavement of Africans. Similarly, the state of Israel has been grounded from the 1940s on forced removals and general military harassment of people out of their homes, and then creating settler colonialism, just like South Africa. That is Western oriented. That is an entrenched concept in Western thinking, that you can just go and introduce violence to people and take over their land. So to try and change that belief is a waste of time. That belief, you use other methods to deal with it, as we dealt with it here in South Africa, and we continue to deal with it.
Mr. Swana, I appreciate your time this evening. Thank you so much for chatting to us. That was Sandile Swana, Political and Governance Analyst.